Hi, I'm Naturopath Dr. Julian Neal. Today I want to talk about what holistic practices help women move through major shifts in their life, like giving birth or going into menopause, career changes, whether gaining advancement or retiring, or beginning a new relationship or undergoing deep loss, all the while maintaining both their strength and their grace. There is a saying in yogic philosophy: grace is not what removes the storms of life. It is what teaches us to walk through them with our heart still open. Today we're exploring the powerful shifts that women can face in life. And I don't use the word transition often because to me it implies that the moment before and the moment after are more important than the moment we are standing in. And so whether it's in naturopathic medicine, psychoanalytic thought, or yogic science, we always are honoring the present moment as the point of transformation. Shift might be a better word. A shift is a conscious recalibration, an awakening, not a passage we try and rush through. So let's explore this from the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual energetic perspectives. First, we'll look at the physical shift, the body's wisdom in times of change. Every major life shift has a biological signature. Whether after giving birth or going into menopause, there is a powerful hormonal recalibration. Estrogen, progesterone, and DHEA will decline in both cases, though the process and the timeline differ significantly. After childbirth, these hormones drop rapidly and sharp, and the sudden drop can cause mood swings, anxiety, fatigue, and in some cases, deep depression. While in menopause, they are gradual, but they're permanent. These changes are not there to punish the body, but to redirect its intelligence inward. These hormonal changes influence many functions: thermoregulation, sleep, brain clarity, mood, thyroid function, hair, skin, and bone health, and sometimes loss, as well as cardiovascular resilience. Women often need a new biological rhythm in either stage of life, one that's supported by magnesium, B-complex, and omega-3s, by adaptogens like ashwagandha, rhodiola, holy basil, by phytoestrogens from seeds such as flax, sesame, sunflower, and also eating legumes. Getting mineral-rich foods in their diet, seaweeds, greens, and making sure there's plenty of movement that strengthens without depleting. Career changes such as caregiving or new relationships and their shifts will definitely stimulate cortisol, adrenaline, and the limbic system. The nervous system must adapt. Otherwise, we know that sleep becomes fragmented, digestion changes, and the hair thins, immunity sometimes drops, inflammation rises, etc. Simple, powerful naturopathic supports of these things include making sure there's enough oxygenation, so deep breathing before you're making any decision made. Protein-rich meals to stabilize the blood sugar, omega-3s for emotional regulation, and getting daily sunlight for balancing the circadian rhythms. Drinking nervine teas like oat straw, chamomile, horsetail, and lemon balm. Loss or grief also create changes. Grief is not emotional by itself. It shows up physically as having a tight chest, shortness of breath, fatigue, changes in appetite, altered immunity, and once again, hair shedding. The body must be nourished gently in these cases. Proper hydration, warm soups and broths, magnesium, B vitamins again, slow walking, making sure there's touch with massage and warmth. The body always tells the truth first. Second, we'll look at the emotional shift, listening to the unconscious. Emotionally, these life changes awaken what psychoanalysis calls the unconscious residues, the old stories, old survival strategies, or even old grief. Unresolved emotions do not disappear. They move. They move into sleep, into digestion, into the joints. They form anxiety. They form resistance, or into the feeling of being stuck. Even the profound joys of childbirth can induce unconsciously one's loss of freedom. In my work as a psychoanalyst, I often say that the unconscious will whisper until it must finally shout. To move through a major life shift, we must consciously work with several things. First, the fear of the unknown, the things of identity shifts it brings about, self-worth patterns, old wounds that are triggered by new circumstances, and the belief that suffering means we are failing. The guilt women so often carry for needing rest or help becomes profound. And key emotional practices become important. Journaling the truth that you do not say out loud, naming the fear without judging it, letting yourself grieve without assigning blame, and getting somatic therapies to move emotion out of the body. Therapeutic conversations to keep the unconscious conscious become really important, and allowing joy and sorrow to coexist without living in guilt. Women at any age often carry guilt for slowing down. But guilt, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, is self-condemnation if it is not transformation. We cannot heal from a place of self-punishment. Third, let's talk about the spiritual and energetic shift, because it's about the higher meaning of the shift. On the spiritual plane, every major life shift is an initiation, a doorway, a refinement of identity and purpose. In yogic science, menopause or childbirth is the beginning of a woman's inner power. Career shifts are a reflection of their dharma and spiritual practice. Gain and loss is the collapsing of one chapter so the soul can evolve to another. And new relationships are openings for love and self-discovery. Spiritually, these shifts ask many questions like, who am I becoming? What am I being asked to release? What truth is rising inside me? And what energy do I no longer want to carry? Most importantly, what does grace look like for me right now? Because grace is not perfection. Grace is not control. Grace is a surrender with dignity. Grace is strength without aggression. And grace is the willingness to trust the medicine of the moment, even when the moment feels uncomfortable. Here are some key energetic practices I recommend to my patients. Breath work always to anchor the nervous system. Meditation to connect to one's intuition. Exposure to nature to reset the subtle body. Heart-opening practices to keep compassion alive. Spiritual study or prayer to reorient the mind, and letting silence teach you while you let love lead you. The energetic body knows how to heal. It simply needs space, breath, and presence. Here are my final thoughts. Women are not fragile in times of change because they are powerful, intuitive, and deeply resilient beings. And when we support the physiology, when we listen to the emotional truth, and when we honor the spiritual meaning, then every major life shift becomes something sacred. Not something to survive, but something to awaken through. And I always say grace is not what removes difficulty. Grace is the light we carry through that difficulty. I hope this helps you walk your own path of change through life shifts with strength, clarity, and always deep self-compassion. Hi, I'm Naturopath Dr. Julian Neal. Today I want to speak about how unresolved emotions show up in the body and what practices we can employ to release them. Emotions are living energies. They don't vanish because we ignore them. They relocate. And as the old saying goes, what we refuse to feel, the body will eventually reveal. As a naturopathic doctor, psychoanalyst, and yogi, I've witnessed time and time again that my patients' unresolved emotions are actually the invisible threads that weave their way through their physical, mental, and spiritual imbalances. And the body becomes the voice then for what their soul cannot yet articulate. And I want to explore with you this through three lenses: the physical, the emotional, psychological, and the spiritual and energetic. First, I'm going to start with the physical plane, when emotion becomes biology. Every thought and every emotion we have has a corresponding biochemical expression. The nervous system, hormones, and immune cells all listen to our emotional state. And when emotions remain unresolved, whether it's fear, grief, anger, guilt, or shame, the body then has to adapt by holding them and creating tension, altering hormonal balance, and sometimes even changing its posture and its chemistry. I want you to think of it this way, that anger and many emotions lodge in various parts of the body. So anger in the liver, chronic frustration often manifests as headaches, irritability, or skin eruptions. Grief settles in the lungs and is felt as tightness in the chest or heart issues or shallow breathing that causes problems. Fear impacts the kidneys and adrenals, depleting vitality and creating anxiety, fatigue, or even insomnia. And worry, it lives in the spleen and stomach, leading to bloating, ulcers, or digestive irregularities. These associations aren't poetic, they're physiological. Our vagus nerve, which connects brain to gut and heart, constantly relays emotional information to the body. Our chronic suppression of emotion, therefore, keeps the nervous system in its survival mode, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And this floods us with cortisol and adrenaline. And over time, these excess chemicals lead to inflammation, lowered immunity, thyroid dysfunction, and pain syndromes like fibromyalgia, among a few examples. So one of the most profound insights of naturopathic medicine is that the body always tells the truth. Our symptoms aren't punishments. They're just communication. All right. Second, let's look at the emotional plane, the psychology of unresolved feelings. In psychoanalysis, we understand that repression is not the same as resolution. When an emotion overwhelms us and we can't process it safely, this is especially true as children, then the psyche has to store it in the unconscious. And it's not gone, it's just hidden. The body then becomes the unconscious actually made visible. And these frozen emotions replay through patterns such as chronic anxiety, overreaction to stress, or physical pain without a clear medical cause. So a woman who grew up, for example, silenced may develop throat tension or thyroid issues. Someone who never felt safe expressing their anger may manifest migraines, autoimmune disorders, or liver issues. In essence, what we cannot speak, the body is going to speak for us. But here's always my hope, that once we bring awareness to the feeling beneath the symptom, the body can finally let go. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Healing often begins not with doing more, but with feeling more. Allowing the tears, the shaking, the breath. These are not breakdowns, but breakthroughs of integration. And third, finally, let's look at the spiritual and the energetic plane. So in yogic energy, yogic science and energy medicine, emotions are understood as emotion, energy in motion. Each emotion vibrates at a frequency, so when we suppress or resist it, that energy then stagnates in the chakras and meridians. This blocks the life force, which is our prana. And over time, stagnation becomes physical disease or emotional numbness. So again, for example, blocked energy in the heart chakra can lead to disconnection and depression. When it's blocked in the solar plexus, it manifests as lack of confidence or digestive issues and lack of digestive fire. When it's in the sacral center, it may show up as sexual shutdown or creativity loss. The spiritual invitation isn't to judge these emotions, but to transmute them, to use awareness, breath, and compassion to restore flow. I always say to my patients, pain becomes purpose when we can bring love and compassion to it. Here are some practices for release and realignment I suggest and use with my patients. The physical practices I recommend are breath work. Deep diaphragmatic breathing or alternate nostril breathing helps reset the nervous system. There are so many ways to find what we call in yogic science pranayamic exercises. I do a series called Meditation Mondays on Instagram and TikTok. You can look for under at Neil Naturopathic. Doing movement, yoga, qigong, or even gentle walking helps emotional discharge through the fascia. Using body therapies, acupuncture, lymphatic massage, or craniosacral therapy all help move blocked energy. The emotional practices I use are things like somatic awareness, simple things like where do I feel this emotion in my body, and then letting the sensation guide you. Journaling or expressive art, externalizing what words can't yet express. And always trying to get therapeutic support. Working with the trauma-informed therapy or perhaps EMDR to safely process stored traumatic experiences. And then finally, the spiritual practices we use are meditation. We want to create inner stillness so feelings can surface without judgment, and we train the mind. We practice forgiveness rituals, not to condone, but to release attachment to suffering. And always I recommend connection to nature. Nature absorbs and harmonizes emotional energy. So sitting by the water, walking in trees, or by the sand in the beach, or simply just watching the sky. The healing principle is not the absence of emotion. It is the freedom for emotion to move. In my clinical practice, I've seen migraines actually lift after grief was released, digestion improve after anger was expressed, and fatigue dissolve after fear was faced. So we heal not by rejecting parts of ourselves, but by welcoming them actually home. We integrate the emotional, the physical begins to regenerate, and then the spiritual reconnects to its source. Unresolved emotion fragments our wholeness. Felt emotion finally restores it. Here are my final thoughts. Every symptom is a sacred conversation. It's actually an invitation from your body to listen more deeply. I always talk about listening to the body. The goal isn't to silence the messenger, but to honor the message. And when we feel what we have long avoided, we return to the full aliveness that is our birthright. The body remembers everything, but it also forgives everything the moment we do. Hi, I'm Naturopath Dr. Julian Neal, and today we explore a profound question. How can women strengthen their intuition and trust it as part of their health and decision making? Intuition is not a vague mystical concept. It is a biological capacity, a psychological intelligence, and a spiritual sense organ. And for women, it's extraordinarily powerful. In yogic science, it is said that a woman's intuition is 16 times stronger than a man's, not as a hierarchy, but as a recognition of her innate sensitivity, perception, and the ability to feel truth beneath the surface. In India, women traditionally walk slightly ahead of the men on a journey. And this is not for status, but because they are believed to sense danger, imbalance, or subtle shifts before they become visible. But intuition does not automatically guide us. We must learn to develop it, listen to it, and perhaps most importantly, distinguish it from fear. I spent 3 years on scholarship studying and getting a degree from the College of Medical Intuition in Vancouver to train in intuitive diagnostics. That work taught me something really essential. Intuition can be trained. Intuition can be strengthened, and it can become a trustworthy guide. And I further realized that much of that training is the very same work we do in meditation, which is quieting the left brain's noise so the right brain can speak more loudly. Let's explore how women can strengthen their intuition through the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions. We start with the physical dimension, strengthening the third eye and the pituitary gland. Intuition has a physical anchor. It's the pituitary gland, often called the master gland of the endocrine system. In yogic anatomy, this is the third eye point, the Ajna chakra, the seat of clarity, insight, and perception. And when this area is overstressed, congested, or depleted, intuition becomes clouded. When it's strong, our ability to sense truth becomes effortless. Practices that strengthen the intuitive centers physically include, first and foremost, meditation, when we're focusing on the third eye point. Even 1 minute of gently lowering the gaze and focusing half an inch above the eyebrows stimulates the pituitary gland and balances the hemispheres of the brain. Using long, deep breathing, slow breathing calms the sympathetic nervous system and it heightens sensory awareness. Intuition cannot function in a stressed brain. Using left brain quieting exercises, so we slow down thinking, ruminating, analyzing, and more importantly, trying to figure it out, the right brain, home of intuitive perception, becomes more active. Meditation literally shifts dominance from analytic thought to sensory knowing. And body scanning practices. One of the foundations of medical intuition is to scan the body, whether your own or someone else's, with awareness and notice where attention lands first. For the self, the first sensation, heat, pulsing, tingling, is almost always the correct intuitive cue. And getting nutrition for intuition, omega-3s, magnesium, hydration, proper sleep, all of these are essential because a depleted nervous system cannot produce clear intuitive signals. The body is not separate from intuition. It is intuition's first instrument. Second, let's look at the emotional and mental dimension, which is discriminating intuition from fear. This is the work I do every day as a psychoanalyst. Intuition is calm, neutral, and immediate. Fear is loud, catastrophic, and future-focused. Intuition is in the now. Intuition says, this doesn't feel right. Fear says, something terrible is going to happen. Intuition speaks once, but fear repeats itself endlessly. When women learn to tell these two apart, their entire lives change. So how do we strengthen emotional intuition? We journal the first thought that comes up, not the rationalized thought, but the first one. That is almost always the intuitive signal. There's an old yogic proverb that says, first thought, best thought. Then notice the tone of the message we're getting. Fear tightens the body. Intuition creates clarity, even if the truth is uncomfortable. We explore old trauma or learned survival patterns because many women confuse hypervigilance with intuition. Part of intuitive development is healing the places where fear disguises itself as instinct. Practice small intuitive experiments. Ask yourself some simple questions like, what does my body want to eat? Who drains me and who energizes me? Or is this decision expansive or contractive? The emotional body is the bridge between instinct and awareness. And when it's healed and stable, intuition becomes precise. And lastly, the spiritual and energetic dimension, using intuition as an inner guide. On the spiritual level, intuition is not a feeling. It is a form of knowing. It's the soul's language. It's how life speaks to us before it becomes physical reality. Intuition is what connects us to our purpose, our boundaries, the people who belong in our lives, and the direction we are meant to walk in this lifetime. Spiritual practices to strengthen intuition are sit in stillness every day. Even 3 minutes of silence strengthens intuitive perception more than hours of thinking. And ask a question in meditation. Then listen for the first impression, word, image, or sensation. That is often the intuitive answer. And trust small intuitive hits. Spiritual intuition strengthens when we build evidence that our inner knowing is trustworthy. And last, connect with nature. Nature recalibrates the subtle body. Intuition becomes clearer when we are grounded, when we move from control to receptivity. Intuition isn't something we try to access, it's something we allow. And perhaps most importantly, intuition grows in direct proportion to self-trust. If a woman does not trust herself, she cannot trust her intuition. And as she heals, her intuition becomes undeniable. Here are my final thoughts. Women's intuition is not fragile or mysterious. It's powerful, trainable, and essential to their health. When we strengthen the physical centers of perception, heal the emotional blocks that distort intuition, and cultivate the spiritual capacity to listen inwardly, a woman becomes aligned with her deepest truth. She makes decisions from clarity, not fear. She recognizes what nourishes and what depletes. And she can feel when a path is meant for her and when it is not. Intuition is not a gift, it's a skill. And every woman has the capacity to master it.